The 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution made it illegal to prevent any U.S. citizen from voting based on their gender. To cut to the chase, it gave women the right to vote. The women's suffrage movement in the U.S. fought for women's right to vote at state and national levels. The 19th Amendment essentially overruled a former unanimous ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court that the 14th Amendment did not make it legal for women to vote in elections. A senator by the name of Aaron A. Sargent first introduced the 19th Amendment to Congress in 1878, but it wasn't until 1920 that it was ratified or approved. In the mid-1800s, women started to ask for legislation that would give them the right to vote. During the women's suffrage movement, the fight for women's right to vote included traveling, giving lectures, writing the government, lobbying the government, and holding civil disobedient events such as hunger strikes, vigils, or parades to bring attention to the cause. Supporters of the women's suffrage movement were sometimes jailed and abused for their participation. In 1797, New Jersey temporarily granted unwed women the right to vote when it established its constitution. In New Jersey, if you owned 50 pounds of property, you were granted the right to vote. Moving backwards, in 1807, the law changed, and only free white males were allowed to vote. Wyoming was almost denied statehood because in 1868, women in Wyoming were given the right to vote if they were over the age of 21. This was 30 years before the rest of the states would be allowed to vote. Wyoming didn't budge, however, on this law, and it was still granted the 44th U.S. state in 1890. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony had great influence on the first attempt. When the 19th Amendment was first proposed in 1878, it was defeated. The 19th Amendment was originally called the Susan B. Anthony Amendment. The House of Representatives introduced the 19th Amendment to Congress 3 times. The first attempt was in 1918, then 1919. In 1919, it was finally successfully passed through Senate. Tennessee was the last U.S. state to ratify the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote on August 18, 1920. Both Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony were instrumental in the women's suffrage movement. Stanton died in 1902 and Susan B. Anthony died in 1906. Neither were ever granted the right to vote. Prior to passing the 19th Amendment in 1920, several states had already granted women the right to vote, including Colorado, Utah, Idaho, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Washington, Illinois, South Dakota, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Oregon, Nevada, Nebraska, Montana, Michigan, Kansas, New York, and Indiana. In 1918, President Wilson switched his stance on women's right to vote from opposing women's right to vote to supporting it. Because of World War I, women were involved in the war effort and feeling as they should have a say in how the government is run. On November 2, 1920, 8 million women voted in the U.S. elections for the first time in history. If you like this video, please click the like button and don't forget to subscribe to the Learning Lockit.